Captain Lee Dong-hyun wiped the sweat from his forehead as he watched his soldiers move through the mountain training course. The Korean Special Forces unit had been running drills for 3 hours under the hot sun, and every man was pushing his limits. Dong-hyun checked his watch and was about to call for a water break when the sky began to change. At first it looked like clouds forming, but the shapes were wrong. Dark metallic objects were appearing from nowhere, and they were huge. Dong-hyun grabbed his radio and tried to contact base, but only static came through. The objects in the sky were getting bigger and more were appearing every minute. Sergeant Choi Sun-woo ran up to his captain with wide eyes. "The objects are everywhere, sir, and they are not ours." Dong-hyun nodded and ordered his men to take cover in the trees. Whatever was happening was not normal, and his training told him to prepare for the worst. Dr. Park Min-ho was in his research station 50 kilometers away when his instruments started going crazy. The electromagnetic readings were off the charts, and the patterns were unlike anything he had ever seen. He switched on the emergency communication system and tried to reach the military headquarters, but the signals were being jammed by something powerful. Through his window, Min-ho could see the massive ships hovering over the distant city. They were at least 2 kilometers long and shaped like dark triangles with strange lights pulsing along their sides. As a xenobiologist, he had always wondered what contact with alien life would look like, but he never imagined it would be like this. The ships began to descend, and Min-ho watched in horror as smaller craft detached from the main vessels. These smaller ships moved with impossible speed and precision as they spread out over the populated areas below. Bright beams of energy shot down from the craft, and Min-ho realized they were not here for peaceful contact. Commander Kim Ji-won was testing her experimental stealth fighter when the alien ships appeared. Her aircraft was equipped with the latest sensor technology, and she immediately began recording everything she could see. The alien ships were using some kind of energy field that bent light around them, but her instruments could still track their movements. Ji-won contacted her base and reported what she was seeing, but the response was chaos. Similar ships were appearing over every major city on Earth, and no one knew what to do. The aliens had achieved complete surprise, and the human military was scrambling to respond. Overlord Vextar stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked down at the primitive world below. The planet was exactly as the scouts had reported, with a weak species that had barely learned to leave their own atmosphere. The Krathan Empire needed workers for their expanding colonies, and these humans would serve perfectly as manual laborers. The harvesting operation should take no more than a few days. The humans had primitive weapons and no real space technology, so resistance would be minimal. Vextar had conquered dozens of worlds, and this one looked like it would be the easiest yet. He gave the order to begin the collection process. War Master Zolketh commanded the ground forces, and he deployed the capture drones according to standard procedure. The drones would use energy nets to immobilize groups of humans, while the larger ships would transport them to holding areas. It was a simple operation that the Krathan had perfected over centuries of expansion. The first shock came within minutes. Instead of running in panic like most primitive species, the humans immediately began to fight back. They used their crude projectile weapons against the drones, and while they could not penetrate the energy shields, they showed no fear. Some humans even tried to grab onto the drones to bring them down with their bare hands. Dr. Park Min-ho watched the battle through his telescopes and began to understand what the aliens were doing. The energy beams were not weapons designed to kill but to capture. The aliens wanted living humans, and that gave him an idea. He began analyzing the frequency patterns of the alien technology and discovered something interesting. The alien energy shields operated on a specific electromagnetic wavelength, and Min-ho realized that human technology could potentially disrupt them. He grabbed his radio equipment and began broadcasting on emergency frequencies to share his discovery with any military units that could hear him. Captain Lee Dong-hyun received Min-ho's transmission and immediately understood the implications. His unit carried electromagnetic pulse grenades for training exercises, and if the scientist was right, these devices might work against the alien drones. He ordered his men to prepare the grenades and wait for his signal. When the first alien drone appeared over their position, Dong-hyun threw his EMP grenade and watched in amazement as the alien craft sparked and crashed into the trees. The strategy worked, and he quickly radioed the information to other units. Within hours, human forces around the world were adapting their existing weapons to fight the alien technology. Commander Kim Ji-won was the first pilot to actually attack one of the main alien ships. Using her stealth fighter, she approached one of the smaller vessels from below where their sensors seemed to have a blind spot. She fired all her missiles at once and watched as the alien ship staggered in the air before crashing into a mountain. The explosion was visible from hundreds of kilometers away and sent a message that echoed around the world. The aliens could be hurt and they could be killed. Human resistance fighters everywhere saw the explosion and realized that their situation was not hopeless. Overlord Vextar could not believe what he was seeing. The primitive humans were actually fighting back and some of his ships had been damaged. This had never happened before in any conquest, and he did not understand how such a weak species could threaten Krathan technology. He ordered Zolketh to increase the pace of the operation and finish the harvest quickly, but the humans kept adapting. Every time the Krathan used a new tactic, the humans found a way to counter it within hours. They shared information instantly across their global communication networks and coordinated their resistance with a speed that amazed and terrified the aliens. Dr. Yoon Nari was a quantum physicist working in Seoul when the invasion began. She had been studying theoretical alien technology for years, and when she saw the real thing, she immediately knew what to do. The alien energy systems were based on quantum field manipulation, which she understood better than almost anyone on Earth. Working with salvaged alien components from crashed drones, Nari began to reverse engineer the alien technology. What she discovered changed everything. The aliens were not as advanced as they appeared, and their technology was actually quite simple once you understood the basic principles. More importantly, she realized that human creativity and adaptability gave them advantages that the aliens had never encountered. Within 12 hours of the first contact, human scientists around the world were sharing their discoveries and building new weapons. The aliens had expected to harvest a primitive species, but instead they had awakened something far more dangerous. They had found a species that did not just fight back, but learned and improved with every battle. The first day ended with thousands of alien drones destroyed and several main ships damaged or crashed. The Krathan forces had suffered losses they had never experienced in centuries of conquest, while the humans grew stronger and more organized with every passing hour. War Master Zolketh looked at his casualty reports and felt something he had never experienced before: fear. These humans were not like any species the Krathan had ever encountered. They learned too fast and fought too hard and showed no sign of surrender even when facing impossible odds. Overlord Vextar realized that his perfect harvest operation had become something else entirely. The humans had turned his invasion into a war, and for the first time in Krathan history they were not winning. The primitive species had become predators, and the hunters had become the hunted. 3 days after the invasion began, Overlord Vextar made a decision that he thought would end the human resistance once and for all. He ordered the complete destruction of a small coastal city to show the humans what happened to species that dared to fight the Krathan Empire. The energy beams from his flagship turned the entire city into molten glass within minutes. Vexitar expected the humans to surrender immediately after seeing such overwhelming power, but the opposite happened. Instead of breaking their spirit, the destruction of the city triggered something in the human species that the aliens had never seen before. Every human on Earth seemed to become angrier and more determined to fight. Dr. Park Min-ho was monitoring communications from his hidden research station when news of the city's destruction spread across the world. Instead of panic and surrender, he heard voices filled with cold rage planning coordinated attacks on alien positions. The humans were not just fighting back anymore. They were actively hunting the aliens. Captain Lee Dong-yun gathered his remaining men in the mountain caves and showed them footage of the destroyed city. His soldiers were silent for a long moment, and then Sergeant Choi Sun-woo spoke for all of them. "They want to make us slaves, but we will make them dead." The captain nodded and began planning operations that would have been impossible just days before. The human resistance had learned to use alien technology by reverse engineering crashed drones and ships. Dr. Yoon Nari had discovered that Krathan power systems created unique quantum signatures that could be detected and tracked from great distances. More importantly, she had found a way to turn those same signatures into weapons. Working in an underground laboratory with salvaged alien components, Nari built the first human anti-Krathen weapon. It used the aliens' own quantum field technology against them by creating harmonic resonances that disrupted their energy shields. The weapon looked crude compared to alien technology, but it worked better than anything the Krathen had ever faced. Sergeant Choi Sun-woo led the first test of the new weapon when his squad attacked a group of alien drones. The quantum disruptor beam passed through the energy shields like they were not there, and the drones fell from the sky like broken toys. For the first time since the invasion began, the humans had technological superiority in a fight. Word of the successful attack spread through the resistance networks, and within hours, similar weapons were being built in hidden workshops around the world. The aliens had made a fatal mistake by leaving so much of their technology behind when their ships crashed. Humans were using that technology to destroy more alien forces every day. Commander Kim Ji-won now flew a hybrid fighter that combined human engineering with alien power systems. The aircraft was faster than anything the Krathen had and could penetrate their sensor networks without being detected. She led a squadron of similar fighters in attacks on alien ships that left the Krathen commanders confused and terrified. 2. The aliens could not understand how the humans were advancing so quickly. Species that the Krathen had conquered before took centuries to develop new technology, but humans seemed to improve their weapons and tactics every few hours. What the aliens did not realize was that humans had been preparing for war with each other for thousands of years. War Master Zolketh attempted a ground assault on one of the human military bases using his best warriors in powered armor suits. The Krathen soldiers were 7 feet tall and had personal shields that could stop any human projectile weapon. Zolketh expected an easy victory, but the humans had prepared a surprise for him. The human defenders used the quantum disruptor weapons to shut down the alien power armor and personal shields. Without their technology, the Krathen warriors were revealed to be physically weak compared to humans. They had evolved on a low-gravity world, and their bodies were not adapted for hand-to-hand combat with Earth natives. Captain Lee Dong-hyun led his soldiers in the counterattack and discovered that the mighty Krathen were actually fragile beings who relied completely on their technology for protection. Human soldiers who had trained for combat their entire lives were more than a match for aliens, who had never fought without energy shields and powered armor. The battle ended with most of the Krathen ground force dead or captured, and War Master Zolketh barely escaping back to his ship. The humans had not only defeated the alien warriors, but had captured dozens of suits of power armor and personal weapons. They immediately began reverse engineering this technology to create even better weapons. Dr. Park Min-ho made another crucial discovery when he examined captured Krathen equipment. The aliens had been using the same basic technology for thousands of years and had never needed to innovate, because no species had ever challenged them successfully. Their weapons and ships were powerful, but they were also predictable and unchanging. Humans, on the other hand, had spent their entire history fighting wars and developing new ways to kill each other. Every human military knew dozens of different tactics and strategies that could be adapted to fight aliens. The Krathen had overwhelming technological advantage, but humans had something far more dangerous, which was creativity and adaptability. Overlord Vextar realized that his harvest operation had become a disaster, but he could not understand how such a primitive species was defeating his forces. The humans seemed to learn from every battle and improve their tactics faster than his commanders could respond. Every day brought news of more ships destroyed and more Krathen forces defeated. The breaking point came when Commander Kim Ji-won led an attack on one of the main Krathen ships using fighters equipped with the new quantum disruptor weapons. The human pilots flew in patterns that the alien defensive systems could not predict, and struck at weak points that the Krathen had never known existed. When the massive alien ship crashed into the ocean, the explosion was visible from space and sent shockwaves through the entire Krathen fleet. The humans had destroyed one of their capital ships using technology that had been reverse-engineered from scraps. The impossible had happened, and the aliens began to understand that they were no longer the hunters. Dr. Yoon Nari worked day and night to improve the quantum disruptor technology, and her latest weapon could penetrate any known Krathen defense system. The aliens had energy shields that could stop nuclear weapons, but they could not stop a beam that used their own technology against them. Every day, Nari's weapons became more powerful and more deadly. Sergeant Choi Sun-woo had become an expert at infiltrating alien positions and sabotaging their equipment. He discovered that Krathen technology was actually quite vulnerable to simple disruption if you knew where to attack. A few well-placed explosive charges could disable an entire ship by overloading its power systems. The human resistance grew stronger every day as more weapons and tactics were developed and shared across the global communication networks. What all had started as desperate attempts to survive had become a coordinated military campaign to drive the aliens away from Earth. The humans were no longer fighting for their freedom. They were fighting for revenge. Captain Lee Dong-hyun coordinated attacks with resistance cells on every continent and realized that the humans had achieved something the Krathen thought was impossible. Despite having no central command structure and using captured alien technology, the human forces were winning battles against one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy. War Master Zolketh sent increasingly desperate reports to Overlord Vextar describing impossible human tactics and weapons that seemed to violate everything the Krathen knew about warfare. The humans fought like demons and showed no mercy to captured aliens. More terrifying was their ability to turn every defeat into a learning experience that made them stronger. Overlord Vextar began to understand that his species had made a terrible mistake. They had come to Earth expecting to find weak creatures, suitable for manual labor, but instead, they had awakened something far more dangerous. The humans were natural-born killers who had been refined by thousands of years of warfare into the most efficient predators in the galaxy. The second week of the invasion ended with the Krathen forces reduced by more than half and the remaining aliens trapped on a world that had become hostile to their very existence. The humans had turned Earth into a death trap for any Krathen who dared to land, and the alien commanders began to whisper about the unthinkable possibility of retreat. For the first time in the history of the Krathen Empire, a harvest operation was not just failing but was threatening to destroy the entire invasion fleet. The primitives had become predators, and the predators had become prey. 3 months after the first alien ships appeared over Earth, the situation had completely reversed from what Overlord Vextar had planned. What was supposed to be a simple harvesting operation had become the worst military disaster in Krathen history, and the aliens were now fighting for their survival instead of hunting for slaves. Commander Kim Ji-won flew her hybrid fighter through the wreckage of destroyed Krathen ships that littered Earth's orbital space. Her squadron had become so effective at destroying alien vessels that the Krathen were afraid to leave their main ships. The humans had not only learned to use alien technology, but had improved it in ways the original builders never imagined possible. The human fighters were faster and more maneuverable than anything in the Krathen fleet, because human pilots were willing to take risks that alien commanders considered suicidal. Kim Ji-won regularly flew attack patterns that would kill most aliens from the acceleration forces alone, but humans were built to withstand much more punishment than the Krathen had expected. Dr. Park Min-ho had established secret communication links with other species across the galaxy, and what he learned shocked him. The Krathen Empire controlled dozens of worlds filled with enslaved species who had never been able to resist the alien conquerors. But now word was spreading that the impossible had happened, and the mighty Krathen were being defeated by a previously unknown species. The news that humans were systematically destroying Krathen forces sent waves of hope and rebellion through enslaved populations on worlds hundreds of light years away. Species that had been conquered generations ago began to whisper about the day when the humans might come to free them from Krathen rule. The Empire was facing the first real challenge to their dominance in over 1,000 years. Captain Lee Dong-hyun coordinated the most audacious operation in human history when he planned a direct assault on the Krathen command ship. Using a combination of captured alien technology and human tactical innovation, his strike teams would board the enemy vessel and take control of it from the inside. The plan was insane by any reasonable standard, but humans had stopped being reasonable the day their planet was invaded. Sergeant Choi Sun-woo led the boarding party that used modified alien teleportation technology to appear directly inside the Krathen flagship. The aliens had never faced an enemy that could bypass their external defenses and appear in the heart of their ship without warning. The human soldiers moved through the alien vessel like ghosts of death, cutting down surprised Krathan defenders, who had no idea how to fight inside their own ship. The boarding action succeeded beyond all expectations when the humans captured the ship's main computer systems and downloaded the complete database of Krathan military technology and tactics. Within hours, this information was transmitted to resistance cells around the world, and human weapons designers began developing countermeasures for every known alien system. Dr. Yoon Nari used the captured data to create weapons that could penetrate any Krathan defense, and her latest quantum bombs were designed specifically to tear apart alien molecular structures. The Krathan had energy shields that could stop anything humans had been able to throw at them before, but Nari's weapons turned their own molecular bonds against them with devastating effect. Overlord Vexitar could not understand what was happening to his forces. Every day brought reports of more ships destroyed and more impossible human victories. The aliens were being hunted through their own fleet by boarding parties that seemed to appear from nowhere and disappear just as quickly. The humans fought with a viciousness that terrified the Krathan, who had never encountered such ruthless determination. The psychological impact on the Krathan forces was worse than the physical damage. The aliens had conquered hundreds of worlds by demonstrating their technological superiority and watching primitive species surrender in despair. But the humans refused to acknowledge that they were beaten and kept fighting with captured alien weapons that they somehow made more effective than the originals. War Master Zolketh watched his casualty reports with growing horror as he realized that the humans were not content to simply defend their world. The reports from captured Krathan databases showed that humans had learned the locations of other alien colonies and were already making plans to attack them. The primitives had become predators, and now they wanted to hunt the Krathan across the galaxy. Commander Kim Ji-won led the attack that destroyed the Krathan secondary command ship, using tactics that the aliens could not predict or counter. The human fighters attacked from 6 different directions simultaneously, while jamming alien communications and using captured Krathan weapons that had been modified to be far more deadly than their original specifications. The explosion when the command ship died lit up the sky over half the planet and sent a message to every remaining Krathan that nowhere was safe. The humans had evolved from desperate defenders to efficient killers in just 3 months, and they showed no signs of slowing down. Every battle made them stronger, and every victory taught them new ways to hunt their enemies. Dr. Park Min-ho made contact with resistance movements on a dozen different worlds that had been enslaved by the Krathan Empire. The alien databases contained detailed information about every species the Krathan had conquered, and Min-ho began coordinating with them to plan simultaneous uprisings across the galaxy. The human victory on Earth was inspiring rebellions on worlds that had been silent for centuries. Captain Lee Dong-hyun received intelligence that made him smile for the first time since the invasion began. The Krathan Empire was facing revolts on multiple worlds, as enslaved species learned that the invincible conquerors could be beaten. The aliens were being forced to withdraw forces from Earth to deal with uprisings they had never imagined possible. Sergeant Choi Sun-woo had become a legend among human resistance fighters for his ability to infiltrate and destroy Krathan positions without being detected. He had perfected techniques for using alien technology against itself and could disable an entire ship with a few carefully placed charges that turned the vessel's own power systems into weapons of self-destruction. The most terrifying development for the Krathan was the realization that humans were learning faster than the aliens could adapt. Every new tactic the Krathan tried was countered within days, and every technological advantage they revealed was reverse-engineered and improved by human scientists working around the clock in hidden laboratories. Overlord Vexitar faced a crisis that no Krathan commander had ever encountered in the history of their empire. His invasion fleet was being systematically destroyed by a species that had been primitive just months before, but was now using technology more advanced than anything the Krathan possessed. The hunters had become the hunted, and the slaves had become the masters. Dr. Yoon Nari's weapons had evolved beyond simple defense and were now capable of destroying entire Krathan ships with single shots. Her quantum bombs created chain reactions in alien hulls that tore the vessels apart from the inside, while her disruptor beams could penetrate any known defense system. The humans had gone from having no effective weapons against the aliens to having weapons the aliens could not defend against. War Master Zolketh attempted to negotiate with the human commanders, but Captain Lee Donghyun's response was delivered through the wreckage of another destroyed Krathan ship. The humans were not interested in talking. They were interested in hunting, and every alien vessel in Earth's system had become legitimate prey for human predators who had tasted victory and wanted more. The third month ended with the Krathan invasion, fleet reduced to less than 30% of its original strength. While human forces had grown exponentially as more people joined the resistance, and more alien technology was captured and improved, the impossible had happened, and the primitive species had not only survived but had become the dominant force in their own solar system. The aliens who had come to harvest slaves were now fighting desperately for their own survival against a species that had revealed itself to be the most dangerous predator in the galaxy. The Krathan Empire was learning what it meant to be hunted by humans, and they were discovering that their prey had become something far worse than they had ever imagined possible. 4 months after the invasion began, the Krathan Empire faced a nightmare scenario that their military leaders had never planned for. The primitive species they had come to harvest was now launching its own invasion, using captured and improved alien technology. Human forces were no longer defending Earth. They were actively hunting down every Krathan ship in the solar system with methodical precision. General Kang Taemin stood in the command center that had been built inside a captured Krathan mothership and watched as human strike teams prepared for their next operation. The alien vessel had been completely redesigned by human engineers who had improved every system and weapon beyond anything the original builders had achieved. The ship that had once threatened Earth was now humanity's flagship in their war against the Krathan Empire. Commander Kim Ji-won led a fleet of hybrid fighters that combined the best human engineering with captured alien technology. Her pilots were volunteers who had lost family and friends to the Krathan attacks, and they fought with a fury that terrified the remaining aliens. The human fighters moved through space like sharks hunting wounded prey, and no Krathan vessel was safe from their attacks. Dr. Yoon Nari had perfected weapons that specifically targeted Krathan biology and technology. Her quantum bombs did not just destroy alien ships, they unmade them at the molecular level, leaving nothing behind but scattered atoms. The aliens had no defense against weapons that attacked the fundamental structure of matter itself, and every shot was guaranteed to destroy whatever it hit. The psychological warfare was just as devastating as the physical attacks. Captain Lee Donghyun had discovered that the Krathan were a species that had never faced real resistance before, and they had no idea how to cope with an enemy that refused to surrender. The aliens were paralyzed by fear and uncertainty, as their perfect invasion became a perfect disaster. Sergeant Choi Sun-woo now led boarding parties that could teleport directly into Krathan ships using improved alien technology. The humans would appear without warning in the heart of enemy vessels and systematically destroy everything they found, before disappearing again. The aliens never knew when or where the next attack would come, and the constant fear was destroying their morale. Overlord Vextar sat in his command chamber surrounded by the wreckage of his once mighty fleet and tried to understand how everything had gone so wrong. The humans had not just defeated his forces, they had absorbed them and made them stronger. Every ship the Krathan lost made the human fleet more powerful, while every victory taught the primitives new ways to hunt their enemies. The reports from his remaining commanders painted a picture of complete military collapse. Human forces were now stronger than the surviving Krathan fleet, and they were growing more powerful every day as they captured more alien technology and improved it beyond recognition. The species that was supposed to become slaves had become the masters of advanced technology that surpassed anything the Krathan possessed. War Master Zolketh received intelligence that made his blood run cold. The humans had not only learned the locations of other Krathan colonies, but were already building ships capable of traveling between star systems. The primitives were planning to take their war beyond Earth and attack the Krathan Empire directly in battles that could destroy entire worlds. Dr. Park Min-ho had established communication with dozens of enslaved species across the galaxy and was coordinating simultaneous uprisings that would begin when the human fleet arrived to provide support. The Krathan Empire was about to face rebellions on every world they controlled, while their most experienced military forces were trapped and dying in Earth's solar system. The turning point came when General Kang Taemin launched the first human interstellar attack, using a fleet of captured and modified Krathan ships. The alien vessels had been completely rebuilt by human engineers and were now faster, more maneuverable, and more deadly than anything in the Krathan Navy. The hunters had become the hunted, and the hunted were now hunting across the galaxy. Commander Kim Ji-won led the assault on the nearest Krathan colony world, using tactics that the aliens had never seen before. Human fighters attacked from multiple dimensions simultaneously while jamming all communications and using weapons that could destroy entire fleets with single shots. The colony surrendered within hours rather than face complete annihilation. The liberation of the first alien world sent shockwaves through the Krathan Empire as enslaved species realized that freedom was possible. Uprisings began on a dozen worlds simultaneously as captured populations turned against their Krathan masters, with weapons and tactics provided by human advisors who had teleported in to coordinate the rebellions. Dr. Yoon Nari developed weapons that could destroy entire planets if necessary, but the humans chose to use them selectively to demonstrate their power rather than commit genocide. The Krathan Empire was given a simple choice: surrender immediately, or face the complete destruction of their civilization at the hands of a species they had foolishly tried to enslave. Overlord Vextar faced the complete collapse of everything the Krathan had built over thousands of years of conquest. Their empire was dissolving as world after world fell to human attack or local rebellion, while their military forces were being systematically hunted down and destroyed by an enemy that grew stronger with every battle. Captain Lee Dong-yun coordinated attacks across multiple star systems using communication technology that allowed instant contact between human forces anywhere in the galaxy. The Krathan had never faced an enemy that could coordinate attacks across such vast distances, and their traditional tactics were useless against opponents who could strike anywhere at any time. Sergeant Choi Sunwoo had become the most feared human among the surviving Krathan because his boarding parties could appear inside any ship regardless of its defenses. The aliens had no safe places left and lived in constant fear of the moment when human soldiers would materialize in their midst and begin the systematic destruction of everything they held dear. The worst part for the Krathan was the realization that the humans were not interested in ruling their empire. They were interested in destroying it completely. Every world that fell to human attack was given back to its original inhabitants, while Krathan technology was studied, improved, and turned into weapons for the continuing war against their former masters. War Master Zolketh attempted one final desperate gambit when he threatened to destroy Earth using a planet-killing weapon that the Krathan had kept hidden as their ultimate deterrent. The weapon was powerful enough to crack a world in half and turn it into an expanding cloud of debris and radiation that would kill everything in the solar system. General Kang Taemin's response to the threat demonstrated how completely humanity had changed since the invasion began. The humans did not negotiate or plead for mercy. Instead, they simply destroyed every Krathan ship that might have carried such weapons and then began hunting down every alien facility that could possibly contain them. Dr. Yoon Nari revealed that human scientists had already developed weapons more powerful than anything the Krathan possessed, including devices that could cause stars to go supernova and destroy entire solar systems. The aliens had awakened something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined, and now they were facing the consequences of their arrogance. The fourth month ended with the Krathan Empire in complete collapse as human forces swept through their territory like an unstoppable plague of destruction. Worlds that had been enslaved for centuries were free, while the mighty Krathan found themselves refugees fleeing from a species they had dismissed as primitive just months before. Commander Kim Ji-won led the final assault on the Krathan home system, using a fleet of ships that had been built by combining the best human engineering with captured alien technology. The vessels were works of art that combined beauty and lethality in ways that the original Krathan designers had never dreamed possible. Overlord Vexitar realized that his species had committed racial suicide when they decided to attack Earth. The humans were not just conquering the Krathan Empire, they were remaking it in their own image, and there was nothing left that the aliens could do to stop them. The harvest operation had become a death sentence for the entire Krathan civilization. 6 months after the first Krathan ships appeared over Earth, the last remnants of the once mighty invasion fleet were being systematically hunted down by human forces, that had evolved far beyond anything the aliens had expected to face. The species that had come to harvest slaves had been reduced to scattered fragments fleeing through space, while their entire empire collapsed behind them. Commander Kim Ji-won piloted her fighter through the debris field that had once been the Krathen flagship. The massive alien vessel had been torn apart by human weapons that used the aliens' own technology against them in ways the original builders had never imagined. Every piece of wreckage was being collected and studied by human scientists who continued to improve their understanding of alien technology with each discovery. The final battle had been less of a fight and more of an execution as human forces surrounded the last major Krathen ship and systematically disabled every system before boarding it. The aliens inside had surrendered without firing a shot because they knew that resistance was futile against opponents who had turned their greatest weapons into toys for human children to play with. Overlord Vextar was dragged from his command chamber by human soldiers who treated him with the same casual indifference he had once shown to primitive species. The mighty ruler of a galactic empire had been reduced to a broken alien who could only watch as everything his people had built over millennia was taken apart, piece by creatures he had dismissed as barely intelligent animals. Dr. Park, Minho coordinated with liberation forces across dozens of star systems as world after world threw off Krathen rule and joined the growing alliance of free species. The humans had not come as conquerors but as liberators, and everywhere they went they left behind free peoples who were eager to help in the continuing hunt for surviving Krathen forces. General Kang Taeman stood in the command center of New Earth, station which had been built from the remains of captured Krathen ships and was now the headquarters for human expansion into the galaxy. The station was 10 times larger than the original alien vessels and incorporated improvements that made it more advanced than anything the Krathen had ever built. Captain Lee Dong-hyun led the hunt for surviving Krathen commanders who had fled to the outer reaches of the galaxy, hoping to escape human justice. But there was nowhere to hide from opponents who had captured the complete alien database and knew the location of every Krathen base and refuge. The hunters had become the hunted, and the hunt would continue until every last alien was found. Sergeant Choi Sun-woo now trained liberation forces on newly freed worlds, teaching them human tactics and showing them how to use captured Krathen technology to defend themselves against any remaining alien forces. The humans had become teachers and mentors to species that had been enslaved for centuries and were eager to learn how to fight back against their former masters. Dr. Yoon Nari had developed technology that surpassed anything the Krathen had ever achieved, including faster-than-light travel systems that could cross the galaxy in hours rather than months. Human ships were now exploring regions of space that the aliens had never reached, and making contact with species that had never heard of the Krathen Empire. The psychological impact of human victory had spread throughout the galaxy as news traveled, that the invincible Krathen had been defeated by a previously unknown species. Civilizations that had cowered in fear of alien attack now sought alliance with the humans who had proven that even the mightiest empire could be brought down by sufficient determination and creativity. War Master Zolketh was captured trying to escape in a stolen merchant vessel and brought before a human tribunal that judged him for crimes against sentient life. The trial was broadcast across the galaxy so that every species could see that justice was possible and that those who preyed upon the weak would eventually face consequences for their actions. The most terrifying realization for surviving Krathen was that the humans were not finished with their war. Every alien facility was being dismantled and every piece of technology was being studied and improved, while human forces continued to expand their search for remaining Krathen strongholds. There would be no peace until every last trace of the alien empire was erased from existence. Overlord Vextar sat in his prison cell and tried to understand how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. The humans had not just defeated his forces, they had absorbed and improved everything the Krathen had built over thousands of years. The primitives had become the most advanced civilization in the galaxy by learning from their enemies and surpassing them in every way. Commander Kim Ji-won led the final pursuit mission as the last Krathen survivors attempted to flee beyond the galactic rim, hoping to escape into the void between galaxies. But human ships were faster and more advanced than anything the aliens had ever built, and there was no escape from opponents who had turned pursuit into an art form. The chase lasted for weeks as the desperate aliens used every trick they knew to avoid capture, but human technology could track them through any concealment and follow them to any destination. The hunters had become perfect predators, and their prey had nowhere left to run in a galaxy that now belonged to humans and their allies. Dr. Park Minho established communication with the fleeing Krathen and offered them a choice that demonstrated how completely the situation had reversed. They could surrender and face trial for their crimes, or they could continue running until human forces caught them and destroyed them. There would be no negotiation and no compromise because humans did not make deals with species that had tried to enslave them. The final confrontation took place in empty space between galaxies, as the last Krathen ship was surrounded by human vessels that had evolved far beyond anything the aliens had ever imagined. The primitive species had become godlike in their power, and the former masters of the galaxy were reduced to begging for mercy from creatures they had once planned to use as manual laborers. General Kong Taemin broadcast the final message to the surviving Krathen as their ship was tractored in by human forces. The age of the Krathen Empire was over, and the age of human expansion had begun. Every species in the galaxy would have the choice to join the new alliance or face the same fate as the aliens, who had thought they could prey upon the weak. Captain Lee Dong-hyun watched as the last Krathen prisoners were loaded onto transport, ships that would take them to worlds where they would spend the rest of their lives working to repair the damage their empire had caused. The aliens who had come to make slaves had become slaves themselves, and would serve the species they had tried to conquer. Sergeant Choi Sun-woo led the final inspection of the captured Krathen vessel and marveled at how primitive their technology seemed compared to what humans had achieved in just 6 months. The aliens had ruled the galaxy with weapons and ships that were now obsolete compared to what human engineers could build from scrap metal and determination. Dr. Yoon Nari began work on the next generation of human technology that would allow them to explore beyond their own galaxy and make contact with whatever civilizations might exist in the vast spaces between stars. The species that had been targeted for slavery was now preparing to carry freedom and justice to whatever corners of the universe might need their help. The story ended not with the destruction of the Krathen, but with their complete irrelevance. As humans moved beyond the need to fight their former enemies and began exploring possibilities that the aliens had never dreamed of, the hunters had become explorers, and the explorers had become gods who would reshape the universe according to their own vision of justice and freedom. The fragments of the Krathen Empire would serve as a reminder to any species that might consider preying upon others that somewhere in the galaxy there were humans who remembered what it meant to be hunted and would never allow it to happen again. The age of empires built on slavery and conquest was over, and the age of freedom had begun, with humanity leading the way into an uncertain but hopeful future.